Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'd like, of course, to start by thanking Project Inspire for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts with you, and I'd like to thank Torah Anytime for streaming the broadcast. I think across the world, every single person has one thing, at least one thing in common, and that's that we all really want the same thing. We want to live and lead happy and meaningful lives. Now, of course, that's very easy to say. The hard part, is getting from here to there and figuring out how to do it. The MindFlex topic this week is 5 ideas that can transform your life. Now, when Rabbi Simcha Barnett first mentioned to me that this was going to be the topic, I was a little bit hesitant because I think that for many of us, and for most of us, how we grow, it can be personal. The way we transform our lives is going to be somewhat different for each of us. But Rabbi Barnett says to me, look, just think of things that have had an impact on you. So, I thought back through it and thought the ideas that have had the biggest impact on my life. Now, one word of caution, I guess, some of these ideas, in fact, probably all of them, really deserve a full class in their own right. And I'm not really going to do justice to them, kind of cramming them all into one session. But if any of these ideas, resonate with you, there's a lot more to be learned about each one of these topics. And, as always, I'm happy to be contacted through Project Inspire with any questions. Growing up, I had a certain view of Hashem. And I don't think this view was unique to me. I think this is probably true for a lot of us. And it actually really continued into most of my adult life. And the view went something like this. Hashem is this big power in the sky, and he sees all, hears all, and he has a set of rules. And he wants us to follow those rules. And if you follow the rules, you'll get rewarded. And if you don't follow the rules, well, you'll get punished, you'll get zapped. When thought about from this perspective, the relationship with Hashem is really just consequence-driven, right? It's about the rules. You're either keeping the rules or you're not. But as any parent or child will tell you, if a relationship is nothing more than just based on rules, on consequences, then it's not real. At some point, the consequences just start to wear off. They're not that meaningful anymore. If the only way you can control your kids is by yelling at them, eventually they just tune you out. If the only way you can control your kids is by bribing them, eventually the bribes are you can't afford it anymore because those bribes just aren't that meaningful. So when I really started to think about it, it really started to bother me a little bit. Is that really all there is? Is it just that Hashem is the power and we got to follow the rules in order to, get rewarded or, the opposite? So I have this friend who is a very successful lawyer. And he told me when he got started that he interviewed at this one firm. And one of the partners who interviewed him was one of the senior partners in the firm, the head of the corporate finance group. He was a very, very big guy in the field. And my friend was very taken by him because he was very dynamic and seemed very genuine. And my friend was like, I want to work for this guy. So he was lucky enough, he got an offer, went to work at that firm, joined this guy's group. But he kind of realized early on that it was very difficult to get anywhere near the guy. Because as nice and as meaningful as the guy was, he was unbelievably busy. And even just getting staffed on his deals wasn't so easy because everyone wanted to work with him. But this friend of mine found out that this partner used to go for a run most mornings at a park near his house. And so this friend of mine decided, even though he wasn't into fitness, he wasn't into running, he certainly wasn't into getting up earlier than he had to, but he wanted to have a relationship with this guy. So he started running at this park in the mornings. And sometimes the guy wasn't even there. But he started seeing him on a regular basis. And I guess at some point this partner recognized that my friend was both at the park and was also in the office. And at some point they got to talking and he said, I'll try to staff you on my next deal. And that's what happened. And he gets staffed on the next deal. And as time goes on, he's getting more and more work. And he is just getting crushed with work. But it's okay because this is really what he wants. And he's really starting to kill it at work. And his career just completely took off. Years later, he was talking with this partner who had really become a strong mentor of his. And he said, yeah, you remember I used to show up at the park, just, I don't know if you know this, I went there early because I wanted to see you and see if you would notice me when you were running so I could try to get, start working with you. And his partner says to him, of course I noticed. When I interviewed you, I was very in favor. I was the one who made sure you got an offer because I recognized some serious talent in you. But talent's not enough. And I wanted to make sure that you really wanted it. So I wasn't just going to come over and hand it to you. You had to earn it. And so I saw that you came to the park and became clear to me you were there just to make sure that I would notice you. So I started giving you more and more work and giving you more and more responsibility on my deals. Because I wanted that relationship. I wanted to try to make it happen, but you had to put the effort in. Hashem didn't just hire us. Hashem put us here. He created us. And he did it because he wants to have that relationship with us. He doesn't just give us rules to do things for him. He says, you're a finite physical human being. I'm the infinite. It's not so easy to build a relationship that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you mitzvos. And those mitzvos, that's where I am, Hashem says. By doing the mitzvos, we can create the relationship. More than anything else, that's what Hashem wants. Every parent wants a relationship with their children. It's not just about doing things for them or having the child do things for the parent. They want the relationship. The child doesn't always recognize it. Not always so easy for the child to see some of the difficulties that happen, some of the challenges, the times the parent says no. Why? It's all because the parent wants what's best for their child. It's exactly what Hashem wants. He wants to have that relationship with us. He wants what's best for us. And every single thing that happens in our life, every single thing that comes from Hashem is there because Hashem wants us to grow. Hashem wants us to have that relationship. Everything we do, all of our life is about that relationship. When you view life this way, things change very quickly. Because now you realize that everything that's going on, it's coming from somewhere. It's coming from somewhere, from someone that wants to have a relationship with you, that wants to be close with you. It makes everything that we do, keeping mitzvot and even dealing with the challenges, a little bit, not just easier, but it's important. Now, of course, even knowing this, it doesn't always quite feel that way. Right? The reality is that sometimes challenges don't feel like Hashem wants to have a relationship with us. It's almost, to quote Tevye the milkman from Fiddler on the Roof, Hashem, I know that we're your chosen people, but maybe you could choose someone else every once in a while. And I think part of the problem is that we don't always see the connection between the difficulties or the challenges that we're going through and things that we're doing. If someone's out driving their car and they sideswipe somebody and they drive away. They don't leave a note. They just drive off. And then a month later, somebody does the same thing to them. It's pretty easy to see the connection. You can sort of look up at Hashem and say, yeah, I guess I deserve this one. But when things happen, things go wrong that we don't expect, and we can't see an immediate connection. We look up at Hashem and say, why? How am I supposed to deal with this difficulty, with this challenge? Everything's supposed to be because it's better for me. Why does it have to be so difficult all the time? Why can't it be easier? When the Jewish people left Egypt and they were in the desert, so already that first day, Hashem, they had manna from heaven, right? Manna fell from the sky, and that was what they ate. And Moshe tells them that first day, you're going to have this manna, this is what you're going to eat. Do not leave anything over for tomorrow. More manna will fall tomorrow. Don't leave anything over, it will just get rotten. Well, not all the Jews listened, and the next morning they came and said, hey, Moshe, this manna fell, and we left it over, and it's rotten now. And Moshe gets angry at them. Now, that's kind of an interesting response. Sometimes you tell your children, don't do that, it's going to make a mess, it's not going to go the way you think, and they don't listen, and it goes wrong, and you don't get mad, just like, well, what do you expect? I told you this is what would happen. Why would Moshe get mad at them? Why wouldn't he just say to them, I told you so, what did you expect? Why was he getting angry? There's this great documentary that came out last year called The Last Dance. It's about the 97-98 Chicago Bulls. And growing up in Chicago, this is really a fascinating thing for me to watch. But one thing in particular that really struck me about it was you get to see what Michael Jordan's psyche was like. And you think, it's all about winning. And that's only partially true. It's not just about winning for him. It's about being the best. He wasn't interested in winning if he couldn't show that he was the best person out there. He never wanted it to be easy. He always wanted to make sure that he was guarding the other team's best player. He always wanted to be the one to do the hardest thing that needed to be done. He didn't want easy. He wanted to show that he was the best. And he knew that he'd only get better every step of the way of his career if he was always trying the hardest, if he was always going up against the best, the most difficult challenge. That's what he needed in order to become great. When the Jews left Egypt, they had nothing. And Hashem was sending them manna from heaven. But part of that was Hashem was trying to train them to recognize that they needed to have bitachon, they needed to have faith in Hashem. And one of the ways that Moshe wanted them to do that was that he said, don't leave anything over. And he didn't want them to even try it, because when the second that they left something over and they saw that it was going to be rotten the next day, well, when you go to sleep at night with nothing in the cupboard, nothing to eat, all you have is your faith, that's hard. But if you know that there's nothing you can even do about it, because the food that you have right now, even if you leave it over, it's going to be rotten, it makes it a little bit easier to get rid of it, because you know it doesn't do you any good anyways. Moshe didn't want them to have any crutch, to have any training wheels and learning about bitachon. Moshe wanted it to be as challenging as possible, because that's what life is all about. Life is about working, fighting, getting through the challenges, through the difficulty. If life was always easy, if everything always went right, we would never get anywhere. I mean, as funny as this sounds, what kind of life would it be if everything I always wanted to do went the right way? I never missed a bus, I never missed a flight, my work was perfect, my boss loved me, every project worked out, I landed every single client, my relationship with my spouse was perfect, my kids did everything I say, I got the exact seat I wanted in shul, everything was perfect, nothing ever went wrong. What kind of life would that be? You'd never get anywhere. You'd never have any growth. The challenges that we have are not challenges. They're opportunities for us to show that we can do this, to show that we can get past this, that we're bigger than that. Even the things that we don't expect. And when these challenges come along, we have to view them that way and recognize that, see them for what they are. They're opportunities. When I'm standing on the platform and the train that I'm waiting for, I get the announcement that the train's canceled. And now I'm going to miss the next meeting that I had at work and I don't know what I'm going to do about it. Instead of kicking myself, what am I going to do? It's, okay, this is an opportunity that Hashem has just sent me. An opportunity for growth. If it always went the right way, we'd never grow at all. Sitting on the beach all day, someone serving you margaritas, it may sound good for a week, but eventually you get nowhere. We need those challenges in our lives in order to actually grow. Now, of course, even knowing that Hashem only wants what's best for us so we can have a relationship with Him, and He gives us these challenges as opportunities in order to help us grow, it still doesn't always quite feel like it. We can have the knowledge, but feeling it sometimes can seem a little bit challenging. And not just challenging. A friend of mine one time went through a pretty significant career setback. He lost his job, and it was a very, very challenging time for him. And I was talking with him, was trying to, just give him a shoulder to lean on. And he said to me, he's like, Josh, look, I know this is for the best, but I'm so overcome with fear, with worry, that I just don't know what to do. Like, how am I supposed to continue to go on and put on a brave face for my kids and for my wife? And I'm so worried about this. I just don't even know how to live my life. I almost feel like I just want to stay in bed all day. But I know it's the right thing, but I don't feel it. It's funny, interesting story. When I was, I don't know how many years this was, one of my kids at their bar mitzvah. So I had just made partner at my firm. And I was at my son's bar mitzvah party, the night of his bar mitzvah. And everyone at work knew that I was my son's bar mitzvah night, because we were a lot going on, and I wanted people to know that I was going to be unavailable for a little while that evening. And as we finished pictures, and we're about to start, guests are starting to arrive, my cell phone rings. And like a complete moron, I decided to answer it. In part because I saw that it was someone from work that was calling me. And I answered it, and it was one of the other partners in the group, someone who was senior to me. And he starts yelling at me about something. He doesn't understand this issue. What is he supposed to do about it? Why didn't I take care of it? And I'm just, and I was kind of angry. Like, why are you calling me now? Call somebody else. Call this guy. I know he can take care of it for you. You know where I am at my son's bar mitzvah. I can't believe you called me. And I hung up. And I'm standing there just like shaking, because I'm both angry, can't believe this guy called me, but I'm also worried, because this is an issue that's going on, and I'm worried there's going to be blowback on me from it when I get back to work the next day. And I'm like going over to my son's part of the party, like walking through this one area where they were taking pictures over to where all the guests were coming in. And I just stopped. I said, okay, look, this is my son's bar mitzvah. It was my oldest son's bar mitzvah, actually. This isn't going to happen again. I need to focus. I need to push that aside. These negative thoughts, these worries, these concerns. And I need to focus right now on making sure that I'm enjoying this. Otherwise, I'm going to be kicking myself years from now. One of the things that we often make the mistake in thinking is that our fears, that our worries, that they're part of who we are. So if I'm worried about something, it's inside of me, it's part of me. There's nothing I can do about it. I just have to live with it. But the reality is, we can control our thoughts. We can control our fears. We can control our feelings. But it takes work. It's very, everyone nowadays, it's like, this is how I feel. Reality is, we can control that. Hashem gave us the ability. But first and foremost, we have to stop and recognize that we actually can do it. Because if you think you can't, then you'll never be able to. Another question, of course, is how do you do it? How do you actually learn to control your feelings? So there are a couple of different actual techniques that I've learned over the years that I found to be incredibly helpful. People often talk about one exercise they do called a gratitude journal, where you write down certain things that you're happy, that you're thankful for. And it's an exercise you do to help teach you to learn gratitude and be thankful to enjoy the things that you have. But there's another type of journal that you can actually use as well. Anytime you have a worry, a concern, doesn't matter what it is. It can be that you're going to get to the store and they're going to be out of what you're looking for. It can be you're afraid that you're not going to land this client, your boss is going to be mad, your wife's going to be upset. Whatever it is, write it down and write down what you're worried about. Keep track of it and go back at times and look at it, and you'll see that very often, in fact, probably most of the time, the thing that you're worried about doesn't turn out the way you think it's going to. What we often do is when a worry comes into our head, when a concern pops up, we so often jump to the worst possible scenario, and that's it. We're under its control. We're done. Something bad has happened. My coworker, my boss is mad at me. It immediately turns into, I'm getting fired. And we let that negativity takes over so quickly that we're stuck. We have to learn to train ourselves that, whoa. We can't jump to the worst possible scenario. We have to be able to actually stop. Hashem gave us the ability to stop, take control, and say, no, I'm not worrying about that. It's not going to work out that way. And if you take time and look at it, you'll see that most of the time, that's what happens. Actually, one other technique that I've learned, for many, many years, most of my life, I had no problem flying. Turbulence, that didn't bother me at all. Just slept through it, no problems. And one time, my wife and I were on a flight back from Florida, and I'm kind of like starting to fall asleep. And suddenly I feel this massive bump. I'm like, I guess we landed already. Except we were only about 15 minutes into the flight, and the turbulence just went crazy. Plane was shaking up and down, felt like it was dropping 50 feet. Things are falling out of the overhead bins. People are screaming. It was absolutely terrifying. And after that, I was just a nervous wreck every time I would fly. The littlest bump, if the pilot started at the beginning of the flight said, we're expecting some turbulence, I was terrified. If he said it should be a smooth ride, I was terrified maybe he's wrong. So if he's not expecting it. It was just, I couldn't win. I was absolutely terrified. And then I learned this exercise that was unbelievably helpful. And it's a little bit counterintuitive, but it goes like this. You lock yourself in a room for 5, 10, 15 minutes, and you set your timer on your phone. No distractions otherwise. And you spend that time doing nothing but thinking of the worst possible thing that can happen on the next flight you're on. All you do is focus on the terrible things that scare you. Timer goes off, turn your phone back on, go out of the room, and go back about your day. You do this enough, what starts to happen is your brain starts to recognize that it can turn the fear on and off at will. You can train yourself that you don't actually have to be thinking about this. Something, a thought that pops in your head, I'm not doing that right now, I'm turning that off. And so the next time that I flew, after doing this a few times, it started to get easier because I realized, hey, these fears I'm having, besides the fact these things rarely ever happen, but I can control how I feel about it. And this works for almost any type of fear. Things that we think control us, we actually have the ability. We can train our minds to actually be able to not let the fear overcome us. And then, of course, if all else fails, one things that work, and it's just, again, I don't know why, but it works. Sometimes you need to be yelled at by ourselves. Stop. It's fine. It'll be okay. I'm not worrying about this now. and you move on with your day. Sometimes that jolt of just saying it out loud actually gives you the ability to control it. So we have to know and recognize that these fears sometimes, they're real, but they don't have to control us. We can absolutely control them. We just have to recognize that we have the ability to do it. Now, even if we're not necessarily being held back by any sort of fear, and we're again recognizing that it's all coming from Hashem for our benefit, and these challenges are for our benefit, and we can control how we feel about them. Sometimes we just sort of think to ourselves, look, I just don't necessarily have the capacity for that level of growth, that level of greatness. That's just not me. We see certain people and we look at them and say, wow, that person's amazing. Like, that's Charlie Harari. He's awesome and he's incredible. But come on, that's him. I'm just me. I'm not ever going to be able to be like that. And we just think that we don't really have capacity for that type of growth or that type of greatness. And so we just kind of leave it to ourselves. It's a really fascinating mitzvah in the Torah. Torah says, Kedoshim tiyu, you should be holy. But the Torah doesn't just stop there. It says, Kedoshim tiyu, you should be holy, ki kadosh ani, because I, Hashem, am holy. And when I was growing up, one of the big ad campaigns that was huge was, be like Mike. Be like Michael Jordan. And every kid wanted to be like Mike. I'd sing the jingle, but I don't want to embarrass myself. But be like Mike. And it was a Gatorade commercial. It was like super, super popular. It was just everyone wanted to be like Mike. And you see this commercial, all these kids like trying to pretend like they're dunking and sticking their tongue out like Michael Jordan used to do. And a few years ago, someone really pointed out to me, in some respects, how ridiculous that commercial was. But be like Mike? I'm a short Jewish guy. I'm not going to be the world's greatest basketball player. That's just not going to happen. What do you mean be like Mike? That seems absolutely ridiculous. Well, Hashem tells us be holy because I, Hashem, am holy? Well, yeah, you're Hashem. Of course you're holy. Holiness is what you are. I'm just a human being. I'm flesh and blood. I'm completely physical. I can't be holy. Why are you telling me to be holy just because Hashem you are? It seems like such a ridiculous comparison. How could it possibly work out? In what world? How can I possibly, as a human being, actually achieve this level of holiness? So Hashem says to us, you know what? You're right. On your own, as a physical human being, you couldn't be holy. So in order to enable you to do it, I'm going to give you something. I'm going to give you a gift. I'm going to give you, Hashem says, a piece of me. Every single one of us that's born, implanted, imprinted in our souls, is literally a piece of Hashem. On our own, we couldn't do it. But Hashem gives us something, gives us this ability, this innate ability to be holy, to be great, to be godlike. It's already there. We don't have to go searching for it. We don't have to go looking for it somewhere else. It's already contained within us. When you know that you have this capacity already, you can't say it's not me. It is you. It's exactly who we are. We have this ability. We have this capacity. It's already there. We just need to uncover it. In a few weeks from now, I'm going to sit down at the Passover Seder, at the Pesach Seder. And one of the things we're going to point out, we're going to mention, is Hashem's going to say that Hashem was the one himself who redeemed us and took us out of Egypt. Ani v'lo malach. I did it, Hashem says, and not an angel. Now, why did it have to be that way? Why actually couldn't Hashem have been the one to actually take us out? Why Hashem have to be the one to take us out of Egypt? Why couldn't it have been an angel? Hashem used angels all the time. Why did specifically Hashem have to do it? So the rabbis explain, in Egypt was such a spiritual darkness, it was so overwhelming and so overpowering. An angel, had he gone into Egypt, would not have survived. As great, as holy, as spiritual as angels are, they would have been overwhelmed and overtaken by the spiritual darkness that existed in Egypt. So Hashem had to be the one to do it. He was the only one that could. But here's the thing. An angel couldn't have survived in Egypt. But we did. We managed to. Imagine you talk to a Jew on the street in Egypt back then. Ask him what his life was like. And say, physically my life's pretty tough. And the reality is I was born a slave. I've been a slave my whole life. bondage and suffering has been all I've known. So my physical life is pretty cruddy. Spiritually, look, I know God exists, but the reality is that I serve idols pretty often. And, we don't have mitzvot, and I probably do plenty of other things that I shouldn't be doing. Because, look, it's just the way I am. Notwithstanding all that, notwithstanding that his physical life was terrible and his spiritual life wasn't so great either, he did something that an angel could not accomplish. He managed to survive and stay with it in Egypt, to continue the recognition that Hashem was the one. Through all that, somebody who thinks he's done nothing with his life, even all the challenges that we go through, the difficulties that we have, just the fact that we're continuing to survive should tell us something. Should tell us of the innate, unique greatness that each one of us has. We can't sell ourselves short. We have such incredible abilities that Hashem gave us because he gave us a piece of himself. We just need to recognize it. We need to stop for a minute and say, I can get through this. I can become greater. I can continue to push forward. Because it's not just me that's doing it. I've got Hashem inside of me that's propelling me to that greatness. A number of years ago, I've had this, the incredible merit and blessing to be able to go on trips to Israel with Project Inspire, with Momentum. And one year I came back, and there was one thing particularly that was focusing on the trip that really was something that I had been struggling with. And it really struck a chord with me, and I was very inspired to try to actually fix this problem for myself. And so I had the inspiration, I had the willpower, I came back, and I started working at it. And I started to see some success. And I was starting to feel like I was really making progress. And at one point, I kind of felt like I had sort of conquered the issue. And then I flopped. And I couldn't understand what the problem was. And I'm like, okay. And I flopped again. And I didn't understand, what's the issue? I have the will, I have the inspiration. This should be working out for me. Why isn't it working? King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, tells us, Sheva yipol tzadik v'kam, that a righteous person falls 7 times and then gets back up. Now, I think typically we understand that to mean that because he's righteous, he has the ability to get back up, to work through it, to get past the times that he falls down. But for the rest of us, look, I'm not a righteous person. When I fall down, I'm gonna stay down. We make the mistake of thinking that growth is linear, right? That it just goes on a straight line. And as we get better at something, and as we grow, it's just going to continue, and there's not going to be any problems. But the reality is that just like with challenges in our lives, with our spiritual growth, with our personal growth, it can't all come easy. At a certain point, it has to get harder. You have to fall down at some point. A righteous person isn't righteous, and therefore he gets up. A righteous person is righteous because he gets up, because he works his way through it. That's what makes him into that righteous person. We need to recognize that we're going to be inspired by something. We're going to want to grow. And at some point, we're going to plateau and we may even fall off. And we can't look at that and say, oh, it wasn't me. I tried, thought it was working, didn't work, I'm done. We have to recognize those moments as those are the times where it's time to pick ourselves back up and continue the growth. In a lot of ways, it's like a trampoline. The higher you want to bounce on a trampoline, the lower you have to get pushed down into the trampoline because that's what sends you higher. Those moments where we fall, those aren't failures. That's the beginning of the next step up. And in fact, Hashem recognizes this. The Baal Shem Tov gives an incredible mashal, incredible parable. A parent is teaching his child to walk. So he's holding the kid's hands as the kid is walking, and the kid's starting to take some steps. And then what does the parent do? He lets go and he backs away. And the child falls down. Now you can imagine the child's view at that point. Like, what are you doing? We were doing great. Why'd you let go? Now I'm back on sitting down on my tush when I should be standing up and walking. Why'd you let go? But we let go because we know that the only way you'll ultimately be able to walk is by doing it on your own. Hashem says, I'm going to help you along. And you're going to feel like you're growing. And then I'm going to let go. And when you have that moment where it feels like Hashem's let go, like you thought you had it, you can't figure out why it stopped, that's the moment when the next stage of your growth is going to start. We have to be prepared and recognize that growth just doesn't go straight up. It plateaus, it dips, and then it goes back. You have to recognize those moments when things do go south. You don't get discouraged by it. You see it for what it is. It's the beginning of the next step. In fact, it's really interesting. The Kedushas Levi, I believe Yitzchak from Berditchev, says that Hashem knows that we as human beings get the most pleasure, the most enjoyment out of growing. But if the growth doesn't stop, like the law of diminishing returns, it stops being quite as enjoyable. So he explains that Hashem actually at times kind of pushes us down. He doesn't just let go, he actually pushes us down because he wants us to know and experience the ultimate pleasure, the ultimate benefit of continued growth that requires falling down a little bit. So we have to recognize this when we get involved in personal growth, that there's going to be those moments where it's not going so well. And even so, that's not the end. It's really just the beginning. And we're coming up on a very auspicious time. It's going to be the time of Pesach, the time that we were actually redeemed. And the rabbis tell us that just like we were initially redeemed in the month of Nisan, the final redemption will come in the month of Nisan as well. So I hope with some of these ideas, maybe you hopefully found them a little bit helpful. With some of these ideas, we can focus on turning our lives and making them even better. And building that relationship with Hashem, we should all merit that this year should be the year, the last Pesach that we have outside of the land of Israel.